Hello and welcome to Your Corner Sticker today. I'm your host, Mama Zawonko. This is a show that brings you closer to all the insights you need to have as a student and, of course, as a resident of the cities where we as a college reside. Today, we will be talking about rental housing licensing in Waterloo. In a city growing as fast as Waterloo, the question of where we live matters now more than ever. For students trying to find their first off-campus apartment, newcomers hoping to call Waterloo home, families balancing affordability, and landlords navigating changing rules. Housing is not just a roof over our heads, it's about safety. It's about fairness, and it's about building a community where everyone belongs. In today's episode, I will be sitting down with the manager of licensing and standards at the City of Waterloo to talk about one of the most talked about issues, the Rental Housing Licensing Bylaw. What does it mean? Who does it protect? And how can we make sure the rules work for everyone and not just a few? Grant will break it all down in plain language so we don't have to worry about confusing jargons. Just a real conversation about the real concerns we have and a look ahead at how Waterloo is working to create a safer, more inclusive housing for all. So whether you're renting, you own a place, or you're just curious about the future of housing in Waterloo, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. Let's welcome the manager, licensing and standards, City of Waterloo, Grant Hurley. Good to have you in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Great. First, I love the weather. When it's bright and beautiful, it's my thing. What's your thing about the weather?
I'm a big fan of the summer, the heat and the sun, going to the beach in the summer.
Stuck
enjoying-
outdoors,
yeah.
calling you. That's great. So how long have you been living in Waterloo, Grant? Have you been here for a long time?
My whole life, I've lived in the city of Waterloo.
Oh, that's great. And what is the most interesting thing about the City of Waterloo?
I think the different cities and the uptown and downtown areas, and there's just lots of different restaurants and things to explore. So
Yes. And to kick off this conversation, can you explain in simple terms, what is this licensing bylaw about and why do we have it in place?
yeah, so the city of Waterloo introduced our rental licensing bylaw back in 2012. We were one of the first cities in Ontario to introduce a licensing bylaw for rental properties. And what it does is it sets minimum standards for low-rise rental properties, ensuring they meet building code, fire code, and maintenance standards.
That's good to know. Now, can you just briefly explain the goals of the licensing bylaw and who is it for? What is it for? How does it operate? How does it work?
Yeah, so it's really designed to both improve the quality of rental housing in the city of Waterloo, both for tenants that live in the properties and for the surrounding communities that have to live beside rental properties, right? So we want to make sure that the rental property is safe for the tenants and it is also being well maintained. So things like garbage collection and grass being cut by the landlord or the tenants, whoever's responsible. So that's really the idea behind it. It requires the landlord to apply on an annual basis. They have to show floor plans to show they're meeting fire code and building code requirements, do annual inspections on the furnace to make sure it's working properly, and provide minimum insurance requirements.
Of course, safety is a big part of where we live. And there are reports that some landlords are now asking their tenants to pay, the licensing fees. How does the City of Waterloo help to ensure that there are mechanisms in place that people are not just being exploited through this payments?
Yeah, so we do try to keep our fees as low as possible. The fees are directly used to fund the staffing of the program, so they're not designed to be an added tax. Unfortunately, some landlords do pass along those costs. There has been rulings through the Landlord and Tenant Board that regulate how much they are allowed to pass those fees on and when they can do so.
And another part of the rental licensing law is that we now have to also, sort of checkmate room sizes. Is that correct? So how realistic is it? I mean, how are you able to manage the checkmating of room sizes, ensuring that they're in compliance with the law?
So as part of the application, the initial application for a rental license, the landlord has to provide a floor plan of the unit with all measurements of rooms and windows, and it's reviewed by our planning staff to make sure it meets all the minimum building code requirements, and also fire safety for egress and other things like that. So that's the part of the licensing process that proactively checks that. That really isn't in place in municipalities that don't have a rental licensing bylaw.
I see. Okay, now, Grant, I'm going to play a quick rapid fire game with you, and not to worry at all, just a few fun and neat questions, and then you're going to tell me if it's true or false, and then maybe shed a little light on how these things can play out in our day-to-day lives. So my first question, please, my first prompt is, landlords can ask for first and last month's rent and a key deposit. Is that a fact? Is that a myth?
That is regulated by the Provincial Residential Tenancy Act. I'm going to say it's partially true. I don't want to speak to legislation that I'm not overly familiar with, but I do know they can hold a security deposit, which they have to return at the end of the tenancy.
Okay. Now, students don't need to worry about rental bylaws. It's just for homeowners. Is that correct?
I think students should be aware of rental licensing bylaws because the regulations are designed to enhance the safety of the units they're renting in. So choosing a rental unit that is properly licensed ensures that we've reviewed it as a municipality and make sure that it's a safe place to live.
I like that. Sure love that. Okay. If I light a candle in my rental, I could be breaking a bylaw.
False.
Okay, please shed some light.
But you're permitted to under bylaw to permit to light a candle, just as long as you're doing so in a safe way and you're not leaving it unattended. But there's no bylaws that prevent that. Your landlord may have rules against that, but there's no bylaws.
Okay, let's talk about the landlords now. Are there resources to help them understand what those rules are and how can they stay in compliance with the rules?
Yeah, so we provide through the application package a long list of the different bylaws that they're required to follow, like fire code requirements, lot maintenance requirements, property standards maintenance. One thing we are doing, we are bringing recommendations to council on June 23rd with some enhancements to the current rental licensing bylaw.
Okay, good to know.
And this will require landlords to provide a tenant information package to all new tenants. So it'll have tenant rights, the process for filing complaints to the city of maintenance concerns. So that is one of the new recommendations we're putting in place, and we're hoping that'll help both landlords and tenants understand their responsibilities.
Okay, thank you. And for renters, if there is a mold, maybe no heat or the AC isn't working, where do they lay that complaint and how do you handle those complaints?
Sure. All those complaints are handled through our property standards bylaw. What our process is, we always recommend that the tenant try to reach out to their landlord first to resolve the issue. If they can't resolve the issue with their landlord, they can file a complaint with the city, and we would send a property standards officer out to investigate. They would order the landlord to fix the problem. If they don't fix the problem, then we can take action to fix the problem and bill the landlord for those repairs.
Okay, so I also noticed that not all the areas or properties are licensed under the bylaw. Is that correct? And if so, why isn't wouldn't that be some downsides to that? And how they're protected for the unlicensed areas? How they've been protected by the government?
Yeah. So right now, apartment buildings aren't covered under a rental licensing bylaw. So it just covers low-rise properties like single detached houses or triplexes, things like that. And when the bylaw was originally developed back in 2012, Waterloo didn't have a whole lot of high rises. We had mostly low-rise rental properties, especially in the student areas. So the bylaw was developed to protect those students or those tenants. Right now, because we've seen such an increase in high rises, particularly in Waterloo, we are looking at recommending a new program to protect tenants in apartment buildings and increase maintenance requirements for those apartment buildings. We plan to return to council in the fall of 2025 to present those recommendations.
Okay, it would be great to know the outcome for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about short-term rentals like Airbnb, which is also part of the bylaw. And I'm thinking to myself, how does that play out for people who need to leave, for a longer term? Because if we have those rentals now put on short term, people who want to rent for a longer time, they might not find, long-term rentals. So how do you address that?
So we introduced the short-term rental regulations back in January of this year, and they were targeted specifically to help improve the availability of long-term housing. So what we were seeing through our review was that a lot of property owners were using short-term rental applications like Airbnb and Vrbo to um, sometimes circumvent landlord-tenant board
Oh, I see.
regulations and vet their tenants before they got into a long-term lease. So the new regulations, what they do is they cap the number of days to 30. So a short-term rental can only be operated for or rented out for 30 days, and it has to be an owner-occupied rental unit. So if an owner is taking a vacation for a few weeks and wants to rent out their unit, they can do so. Or if they want to rent out a bedroom in their unit, they can do that. But it can't be, an owner can't just buy, let's say, an apartment building or an apartment unit and then operate it solely as a short-term rental. So that's what the new regulations are designed to do. And so far, we've seen a lot of success with that.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the full clarification. 'Cause I was a bit confused, like, oh my God, how's this going to play out? But that's great. Now let's talk about so far we've had this play out for about since 2012, so that's over about 6 or more years, definitely, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And what success have you seen since this bylaw has been implemented?
We've seen a lot of success. We've through the program we've identified a lot of serious safety concerns. So bedrooms that have been created without building permits, without proper egress for the tenants to get out in case of a fire, electrical safety issues, fire safety issues, issues with the furnace, gas leaks. And so we've seen a lot of success in identifying those proactively before they become a problem, and also improving just the overall maintenance and quality of rental housing in the city of Waterloo through the program. I think having proactive measures to ensure landlords are meeting the standards really helps us with that.
Okay, that's great to know. Now, I'll present to you a few scenarios, and I would like for you to state who is responsible, the landlord or the tenant. So, first, who fixes a leaky tap?
Landlord.
Landlord, okay. Who removes a raccoon from the attic?
Landlord.
Okay. Who mows the lawn when it's 30 degrees out?
That can be either the landlord or tenant, depending on your lease. So ultimately, it's the landlord's responsibility to maintain their property, but sometimes lease agreements have a requirement for a tenant to maintain snow and grass.
And the law creates room for that, for sure, right? Okay, great. Now, how are zoning amendments aligned with licensing regulations? Because I know that some parts of Waterloo, where you have most of the students, housing, they're not really like. How do you align that? How do you align those zones, with the licensing bylaws?
Yeah, and as previously mentioned, the zoning changes recently have seen the ability for property owners to add up to 4 additional units to their property in a residential zone. So we're seeing more additional units, like basement units or garage units, backyard units being added. So through our review, we've looked at those and made sure our regulations address those types of units as well. And then, as previously mentioned, we're seeing an increase in high-rise buildings, and that's directly due to zoning changes as well. And that's why we're looking at a high-rise or an apartment building safety program to address those changes as well.
Can you please share with us what are the key performance indicators, on this project when we're looking at vacancy rates, compliance, access to licensing, etc.?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, to be honest, because we're looking at thousands of units, and we're constantly getting new rental units and units that are leaving the program. But what our key indicator is really how many units that we have licensed, and how many units or landlords aren't licensing the property. So we see a lot of value in the landlord getting their license and going through the process, and that's how we catch a lot of the issues. We also look at um, identifying units that have been built without a permit. So sometimes landlords will add a basement unit and just do the work themselves, and it can be sometimes a little sketchy. So we definitely look at those and how many we're catching through our review program. So those are some of the key ones. And then there's like kind of the anecdotal evidence of neighbors beside a rental unit and it being properly maintained and being part of the community. We want the tenants to not to feel that their property is integrated with the community and they're part of the neighborhood, and having the properties properly maintained helps long-term neighbors accept that the rental unit in their neighborhood a little more.
Yeah, true, because we need good neighborliness too.
Yeah.
To improve the standard of our living. Okay, my final question to you, Grant, maybe on the final, because sometimes I can have a little more. But how do you balance rigorous enforcement when it comes to, the innovation around student housing? Now we see co-housing and then modular models. How do you address that?
Yeah, and that's part of our current review, is to make sure we're capturing those types of housing, and we're always looking at the changes to our zoning that allows for different types of housing. Right now they are captured, and if a tiny home or something is added to a backyard, that would be captured under regulations as well if it's rented. We're always using technology to improve our review and search for those. So looking through internet searches, and we're exploring new technology to identify short-term rentals in a more efficient way. So that's kind of how we're always trying to keep one step ahead of the changes.
Okay, because stories are so powerful. I would like for you to share with us a story of maybe a landlord or a tenant who really was able to show to the city of Waterloo that this is what exactly we're looking to see in terms of how the bylaws should be maintained or complied by. So can you have any stories to share maybe on how the landlord maintained his house, or how the tenant was able to, demonstrate that he or she is worthy of living in that apartment? Do you have any stories to show?
There's a lot of examples of times where we've really been able to go in and help a tenant in a situation that's, they're living in a situation that's unsafe or not maintained, and the bylaw has been able to correct those issues and make sure that they're in a safe situation. We've seen tenants, multiple tenants sharing a bedroom. One example, we went into a townhouse and there was 15 tenants, all sleeping on cots in the basement. Obviously, it was affordable rent, but it just wasn't a safe or healthy environment for those tenants. So we were able to have the landlord correct that and find new space for these tenants that was more appropriate.
Yeah, and we appreciate what you're doing at the city, and we're grateful for you being here today. I just wanted to say that, how does the city of Waterloo manage homelessness? I know this is not exactly part of the conversation, but in the case you just mentioned now, 15 people living under one roof, that's definitely a health hazard. But how are you able to then provide the next step for these people?
Yeah. So the city's really taking this seriously right now. It's obviously an issue that's impacting a lot of municipalities across the country. We in the city of Waterloo, we take a very compassionate approach with people experiencing homelessness, looking for resources to assist them. So if it's a financial issue, or if it's a mental health or drug abuse issue, looking for the proper resources and connecting them with those resources. And then also looking at ways to make housing more affordable. We have a whole team that's working on that right now to look at strategies and how we can improve housing in the city of Waterloo.
And so you're actually presented to the council June 23rd or 28th?
23rd.
23rd.
So next Monday.
Exactly. So we'll be looking out for that report, the final report from the council. But looking ahead, what are your top priorities in terms of how are you going to manage reducing cold protected tenants, ensure affordability, and build trust between tenants and landlords?
Yeah, a lot of our updates that we're bringing on the 23rd are targeted in making the licensing process more accessible for landlords, but also enhancing the protections for tenants. And one thing I mentioned previously was the tenant information package that landlords will now be required to provide to their tenants. And that's just one step to make sure that tenants know their rights and know how to access the different various services in the city that can assist them in maintaining their rights and through the landlord-tenant process or a bylaw complaint, how they can access that.
And for anyone who's interested in knowing more about this work, where can they find some resources or materials online?
So our website, our rental licensing website, has lots of information about the licensing process. Our report will be published, that's going to council on the 23rd, will be published in the next week and available online. It has lots of great information about what changes we're recommending to council. They can tune into council on the 23rd and see our presentation and they also if students or tenants have concerns that they want to raise to council, they're always free to email their local councillor and discuss the concerns they're seeing.
It's been great speaking with you, Grant Curfew, the manager licensing and standard city of Waterloo. Thank you for educating us on the Rental Licensing Bylaw. Now we know what to do and where to go if we do have any issues in terms of housing. It's been great speaking with you, and I do hope that everyone will pay attention on Monday, June 23rd. Grant and his team will be live at the council to share their findings, their discoveries with this survey and project they're currently working on. So do your best to participate if you do have questions. Don't leave anything to guesses. Now you have information to work with. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today. My name is Mamaza Wonker. I'm your host as always. And do not forget to follow us on our social media platforms at ccdtv.ca. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.